Pauline Swift for Our World Media Magazine. I have a special guest with me today, Mr. Edwin Roman from ESPN. I'm doing, if you've noticed, audience, I've been doing a series of stories on people making it in New York City, but I want to give a human interest story to the stories to give inspiration and hope to individuals that are struggling with their careers and realizing that if you keep persevering, you can make it. You grew up in the Bronx.
I did.
Tell me about your story.
I will. But first, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your publication. It's truly an honor and happy to share my story. I grew up in the Bronx, grew up initially in the Baychester area of the Bronx when I was very young. But my dad passed away when I was about 5. And so my mom moved us to the South Bronx to be closer to her mom. So it was really my grandparents that became sort of like our second sort of parents on hand. Obviously, it's a big transition having 2 kids and not having a dad around anymore. So our grandparents became sort of that substitute. But in the South Bronx, one of the big things obviously is the environment is a very tough one, and trying to make sure that you're doing the right thing and obviously not be influenced by some of the things that are around you is always a tricky balance. But I'm really happy to say that I had a strong foundation in terms of who my mom was, who for many years, was my mom and my dad until my stepdad came into the picture. But having that foundation and then also an environment around us in terms of a school system that really felt like a community that supported what we were trying to do as a family. So I think those things collectively were a big part of making me who I am today.
I'm always very interested in the path that people take, especially if you're living in a questionable environment. Which road will lead you to the right, career-wise and family and stuff like that. And from what you're saying, you had that support system.
I did.
So you would say that the support system was one of the key points in your life turning out good.
Definitely, because I had a lot of people that I grew up with, like really close friends that had that same decision about like, do I do the right thing or do I maybe do something that's not, so celebrated. And having seen a lot of people do the wrong thing, it was kind of one of the things that kind of kept me on track too. So obviously having my mom as a foundation and her always constantly telling us that education is a big part of us becoming who we wanted to be. And that with having exposure to kind of what the wrong path led. And I think that the big thing is recognizing that the wrong path was very alluring for people, right? Because it was almost like an easy victory in terms of getting things, right? Because that's what people wanted. They wanted things that they didn't have at their disposal. But what I saw was at the expense of getting those things usually came a very hard fall at the very end, whether it was jail or whether it was actually being, someone that was a victim of violence. Like I had friends that passed away that I grew up with. So I tried to use those things to make sure that sort of I kept the right frame of mind in terms of how I approached my own life.
Okay. Now, you work at ESPN. What do you do? And how did you get into the field that you're in now?
Great question. So what do I do at ESPN? To keep it as simple as possible, I work in a sales and marketing organization. And very simplistically, we represent the voice of the fan. And so I work in research, trying to make sure that people around the company understand how the fans, and that's what the word we use to describe customers, feel about who we are and what we do. And so we understand how they feel about sports, which is probably the most obvious connection, but also their media consumption, how they use media, and how does ESPN play into that equation. There's the ESPN brand itself, how people feel about the brand. And for us, it's making sure that people have an emotional connection to ESPN, which is a big part of what makes the brand the brand. And then the final piece is just the content around ESPN. And what do people enjoy about the content? What do they think about the talent that's associated with that content? The talent really is the face of our brand. And whether it's TV or it's a digital platform or radio, that's a big part of representing ESPN. Mm-hmm. In terms of how I got to ESPN, that's actually more of a funnier story. So when I came out of grad school, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I did know that I wanted to try something called market research. It was something that I did as part of my second year of a graduate assistantship, where I worked at the New York State court system. And so I got a taste of market research, but I didn't know much about it because I never really studied it in school.
Okay.
So what I did was I said, all right, if I'm going to work in market research, I'm going to work for the best company out there. So I actually purchased my own market research textbook, and I taught myself, and I just started reading from chapter to chapter. And when I got to chapter number 2, they had the top 50 market research companies in the world. So I said, again, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to work for the best. So I started literally at the top at number 1, and I worked my way down, trying to get an interview and trying to get a position at one of these companies. So by the time I hit number 4 on the list, I actually got an offer from a company called Roper Starch. And so it was my first sort of job outside of graduate school. And I got a chance to do consumer trends research. And I was there for 4 years. And then it was really interesting. So it's always about opportunity, right? Because there was this one woman who left the company, an executive. And when she left, that was my opportunity to take her role. And when I took her role, ESPN became one of my clients. So we serviced a number of different clients from the food category, from the technology category, automotive. So ESPN became one of my clients, and being someone that wanted to be really client service oriented, I would reach out to ESPN and try to get, a working client relationship lunch set up. And I never had any success. And then one day out of the blue, I get a phone call saying, "Oh, we'd love to have that lunch." And I'm like, "Great, I've been waiting for so long to have this lunch." Mm-hmm. So we have this lunch in a I'll never forget it, an upscale Chinese restaurant in New York City called Shun Li's. So we're talking about the relationship over lunch. And then, we probably went through the business side of it relatively quickly. I would say the first maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And then the person I was speaking with, she started asking me a little bit about my background, almost like we're doing here. Uh-huh. And she's like, "Tell me about, where you're from, what you do, what did you do for school?" So I kind of went into my background and had no idea why. I thought she was just being friendly and personable. And then the very next day, she called me and she said, "We have a research position open at ESPN. Would you be interested?"
Oh my goodness.
And so I was like, wow. I'm like, all right, so here I am. I seem to love to do this thing called research. And she's telling me I get a chance to work in sports, and I love sports. So I had a great chance to kind of combine both together. So of course I try not to be too excited on the phone. Mm-hmm. You don't want to give away your cards too soon. I said, "Well, I might be interested in talking to you." So the rest kind of became history. I interviewed for the position, and that's how I got it. So I always tell people, you never know who you're going to be speaking to because that person may be your next boss, and that's exactly what happened. So I was being interviewed without knowing it. So one of the lessons is always make sure that you're putting your best foot forward in terms of what you're representing about yourself. Because again, it may be your future boss or maybe a future colleague of yours. So that's a big part of how I got to ESPN.
How do you feel about your life story? I mean, this is wonderful.
I got to give a lot of credit to my wife, Somi, because I think she really shows me that what I do, I almost take myself for granted. And she says what you do isn't necessarily the norm, right? Coming from a very tough environment to make it to a company like ESPN. So almost having to look back and be really content with the fact that I've been able to do something not everybody that I grew up with was able to do. And I'm happy to say that there are friends of mine that have made it and done really great things for themselves, but that is the smaller percentage of the people that I grew up with. So I guess you could say I'm really happy with where I am. I think a big part of doing what I do is going back to one of my really centerpiece quotes. And it was attributed to a number of different people, but I'll attribute it to the person that I think I saw it most connected to, a gentleman named Branch Rickey, who signed actually Jackie Robinson and Roberto Clemente. And he said that luck is the residue of design, right? And that is the most profound quote for me because luck is a big part of how you get to where you're at. If you think about my ESPN story, I was lucky, right? I was at the right place at the right time. But like I said, luck is the residue of design. So it's what you put into it. You have to put yourself in a position to be lucky. Luck doesn't just come by itself. So I worked very hard for many years, whether it was reading that market research textbook, whether it's sort of keeping myself grounded and almost trying to divorce myself from the things that were happening around me growing up in the projects, and making sure that I was putting myself in a position so that when luck was ready to have me, I was ready to meet it. And so that's a big part, I think, of what people need to really be invested in is, yes, you need opportunity and you need chance, but you also need to make sure that you're giving yourself those best opportunities so when they come to you, you can connect with them.
What do you say to people that is trying to get into the field that it's like it's very discouraging at times. I know for a lot of people that's involved in this business, and they want to give up. You didn't. What would you say to them?
I would give them two words. I would say connectedness and relentlessness. And the first, connectedness, is a very important point because it's who you know that is a big part of your success potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I said, you make your own luck, but a part of it is making sure you're in a position to receive that luck. So actively networking, making connections, even if it's, if it's being part of an unpaid internship, or it's just reaching out to people that have made it for informational interviews. I think the one thing, as when I think about older professionals that have given me, it hasn't always been, I need a job, or, give me this. It's more about, can you help me understand? And then you make those connections, and then it's almost like planting seeds. And then one day, one of those seeds is going to blossom. It's going to come to fruition. Mm-hmm. So it's making sure that you maintain a network of people that can help you along your path. And you never know when you're going to need those seeds. But it's a reciprocated relationship. So, I've been fortunate to be exposed to a lot of really smart professional people that have planted great seeds in me. But at the same time, I try to pay it forward as well. So if I meet younger people, like I was also part of an organization where we set up mentoring sessions with younger people. And part of that is making sure that I'm giving my time, not to say, well, I'm at ESPN, I made it, now I can't look back. Like, that's very selfish. It's about giving them those seeds. And again, I think it's reciprocated and it kind of goes both ways. Mm-hmm. But the great thing about that too is that as a professional, thinking about if you've made it, part of it is continuing to make it, because it's not just, sort of like an end, it's a constant journey, right? So reverse mentoring is a big part of why I think those relationships are wonderful, because if you're impacting words of wisdom on a younger person, they obviously appreciate that because they're basically getting great advice from your years of experience. But at the same time, they can expose you to things that are new and indifferent now.
That's true.
You can't learn everything on the job, and there's certain things that are just generational, certain things that are like part of the new environment. Again, things like social media, things the way people are changing in terms of how they communicate is very different now. So it's almost like being extremely humble about, yes, I am where I am, but if I want to continue to be what I am and be something even better moving forward, I have to reciprocate that relationship with someone maybe that is less experienced, but offers experience in a different way.
Okay. Eddie, what haven't you done yet that you would like to do with your career?
Oh, that's a great question. What haven't I done yet? To be quite honest, I think it would take me out of the business world. I enjoy what I do, and it gives me a lot of satisfaction. It's helping to build a brand, and it's building a brand that I believe in, and a brand that I think is a big part of people's lives. So in that sense, it gives me sort of internal pride to work for ESPN. But at the same time, I almost feel like there's so many people that still have a lot to overcome. Like, is there something else that I could do with my skill set that allows me to broaden, beyond just ESPN? So I don't know exactly what that path is, but I just feel like, I make a corporate impact, but am I making the big community impact that I'd want to? And again, I do it in small pieces, but I think there's a lot more I could do. Again, I've been fortunate to be given this position, but I want to continue to pay it forward. So I'm thinking about something else, but we'll see.
Okay. Pauline Swift for Our World Media, speaking with Eddie Roman from ESPN. Thank you for being on our show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
And I wish you the best continuously.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.